Hello and welcome once again to Cooking with Love. I'm Linda Verasso, and I'm going to be your host today and your cook. And behind the camera we have Fred Hickson once again, who takes good care of us as far as that goes. So we're going to make today one of my most favorite things that my grandmother used to make for us, and it's her ricotta pie. If you are Italian at all, then I'm sure you're familiar with it. If you're not Italian and you like cheesecake, this makes cheesecake look like I don't even know what. It really is an Italian cheesecake. You can probably tell from the fact that we make it with the ricotta, but it is really truly one of the best flavors that I've ever had, and I love the texture of it, etc. So we're going to jump right in here. There's actually a couple of parts to this. And the first part is a crust. Now there are all kinds of theories about what makes the best pie crusts. And I'm going to stick with the one that my grandmother always made. But as I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can change it up if you'd like to. Pie crusts typically contain 3-4 ingredients. Okay, and I hesitate there because the fourth one you use if you need it, which is water. And all it includes is flour, salt, some sort of lard. Actually, I'm lying to you, there's 5 ingredients. And then in our case, we're using egg yolks to help bind it all together. We also have a little bit of water here we're going to use to make it moist, and that's about it. Now, the difference, though, is we are going to use Crisco shortening, which comes in these handy-dandy little containers, as you've probably all known. We're going to use Crisco. You can use butter. You can use half Crisco, half butter. You can even use oil. The key is that you need a fat. So you can use any combination of these things. And there are people who believe that butter makes a flakier crust. There are people who believe shortening makes a flakier crust. I can tell you that they both make great crusts, but I have noticed that Crisco crust has less of a flavor than the butter crust does. And that probably makes sense to you. So you just keep that in mind as you're making them. If you want all of the flavor to come from the filling, as opposed to the crust, then you would probably stick with more Crisco. If you are looking for that buttery type flavor, then you would look for the butter crust. The oil is actually somewhere in between. Not something, honestly, I've ever used, but I know you can. So it's simply a fat, some flour, etc. So, but we're going to stick with the traditional. On my grandmother's recipe, she uses 1 cup of Crisco, which is equivalent to 1 of these jars or these bars, and then she uses 2 cups of flour. We're going to use 2 egg yolks, and we're going to use a little bit of salt. So when you do that, we're just going to grab a bowl. We're going to put the flour right in. We are going to just spread that out a little bit, and actually I'm going to get some gloves on here. And the reason I'm going to do that is more about the fact that when I mix it, because this is when you crumble with your hands, I don't like getting it in my rings. So if you have gloves at home, this is a great time to use them. If not, it doesn't matter since you're the one eating it. So we're going to put some gloves on. We made a little well here, or we spread out the flour a little bit. We're putting in a little bit of salt. As I mentioned, we've got a couple egg yolks. And then we're going to put the Crisco, which, as I said, makes it so much easier when it has it in these. If not, you can certainly use the tin. That's up to you. But obviously, then you got to measure it, which can get messy. So I just put this in there right like that. And the next step is simply to take it, and you want to squish it through your fingers. You're trying to crumble this up. And I'll show you this in just a moment. I can probably get it a little bit over in this other camera here. But we're just crumbling it up. And you can see it gets all over your hands and fingers, so that's why gloves are nice. But it's a very simple process. Another thing is that if you do use butter, especially butter, you want to have the butter be cold. And you can even cut it up in little pieces if you'd like to. You want it cold because it melts at a much lower temperature than Crisco. and therefore the heat from your hands will start melting that butter, and it becomes a lot messier, and you're not going to get this crumble that you're looking to get as you make this crust. So we're in pretty good shape here. But just as you can tell from what I'm doing, I'm kind of flattening out and crumbling with my hands any of those chunks of Crisco. As you can tell, it doesn't take very long to do. And all you're doing is kind of incorporating that the yolk around that flour. All right. Then once you have that, just clean off the hands here. I'm actually going to take one of my gloves off. So I tend to do this other part with just one hand. And then I'm going to just get a close-up of that over here, perhaps, if I can. If not, we're not going to worry about that. We'll go this way. But we are going to take it, and to that, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of water. Now, you can add it a little bit at a time. All this is going to do is help bring that together into forming a ball that we are then going to roll out. So now I'm just kind of squishing it together and trying to bring it all together into that ball. You want it to be moist so it holds together. And you can see potentially as I'm doing that, we're no longer having crumbs, we're getting better adhesion here to itself. We're going to add a little bit more water. You do want it to be moist. And actually, which if you want to go back to talking about butter versus Crisco for a moment, those people who think the butter is more flaky of a crust, the reason is butter contains a lot more water than Crisco does. So what happens is as it cooks, the steam helps that dough to rise, and that becomes a much more flakier crust. Now, I've never done the test, but I can tell you that the flavor is certainly different depending on which fat you use. All right, so this is feeling pretty good here. It's feeling, I'm going to give just a touch more. And again, all you're looking for is for it to stay together nicely and not look crumbly. You want it to be more smooth. And you should be able to literally just lift it up. You'll have a nice ball of pastry dough like that. And you're done. Now this step, if you want to, you could do beforehand. And in fact, you want to do it a little bit beforehand, because while I could just take this right now as is and start rolling it out, it works a little bit better if you let it chill for a bit. So that's what we're going to do. Right now I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. I have one actually that I had put in a little earlier, which we'll end up using. So give me a minute. We're going to take this out. We're going to set up to roll it and show you how we roll it. And we'll go from there. So we'll just see you in one moment as we put this away. Okay, so now that we've made the dough and we got it in the refrigerator, as I mentioned, I did have one that I've already done that to. But let's go through what we need in order to make this the easiest and most efficient segment here. First thing is we have the refrigerated dough. I've got a little extra flour, which we're going to use because the dough will stick even to parchment paper, which we're going to use. So I like to use a little extra flour. I'm going to use a 9-inch cake pan. Now, you can use a regular pie pan. You could even use a tart crust if you'd like to. You'd want to go a little larger. But this here I like because it's like having a deep dish pie. And I use these a lot for quiche, etc. If you don't have a 9-inch pie pan like this, they sell these foil ones in all the grocery stores. You can always grab one of these. If you have an Ocean State around or anything like that, you can find these very inexpensive. So this is a 9-inch one that we're going to use. And the only other things we need are a rolling pin. I'm using parchment paper instead of just directly on the board. You can, if you want to go directly on the board, you can. You'll see why I use parchment paper in just a moment, however. And I've got two pieces. I've got one for the bottom and I've got one I'm going to put on top. Again, you don't have to put the one on top. to me, it's just easier, less sticking, less mess, but it's up to you. Now, as you're rolling it, one of the things that I always, I'm not necessarily that good with is kind of assessing how big you need to roll something. So one trick to do that, if you don't know this already, is to take your pan, put it right on the parchment, and draw the outline. And once you do that, you know how big you need that dough to be, right? Well, you don't want to do it on pencil lead, so you flip that over, and you can still see it through. The paper is thin enough that you can still see the circle, and I'm going to put that on, use that as a guide as I'm rolling it out. Okay? As I mentioned, however, we do want a little extra flour because this dough is wet, and you want to make sure that it comes off nicely into your pan. So we have this. Now we also, as you will notice a little later, we put a little lattice work on top of our the pie at the end of it, after we fill it. So for that, I'm just going to reserve maybe a quarter of the dough. I'm just going to put that off to the side here, and we'll use that a little bit later. I'm not going to show you that now. I'm going to show you that after it's full. We're going to use that to create lattice work. But for now, let's do the main section. We're going to take the dough that's been refrigerated. We're going to kind of flatten it out with our hands a little, put it right in the middle of our circle, and give it a little head start with your hands. And then we're going to take it, and we're actually going to put a little bit more flour on top of it. Cover it with this, and then we're going to start rolling it out. And you just go each way. My hands are floury, so now the roller is sliding. But you're just going out, and we're going to just even pressure from the center out. And then you'll just keep going in all directions until you're beyond that circle, because you also, remember, need to go up the sides. So you want to go beyond that circle, which we are well beyond here at the moment, because I can't see it anymore. That's why I know that. And once you get there, which I think we're pretty much there now, you're in good shape. You can remove that top piece, and as you can tell, because of the flour and the fact that it's parchment paper, it comes off nicely. I'll leave that here. Now here's the trick. All right? Getting this to stay whole into this is not always easy. In fact, $10 says it's going to break when I try, okay? But let me give you a couple ideas on how to do that. One, this is what my grandmother used to do, but I'll never be as good as her, but I'll give it a shot anyway. What she would do is put the roller right on the dough, and then she would take the paper up and kind of let it rest. And then she would roll it back and lift it up. Oh, see? She would do it much better than that, but she would roll it back and lift it up. Let's give that one more shot, because I was doing pretty well. I was impressed with myself. Okay? And then she has it like this. Oh, there we go. And then she will take it and put it into the pan that way. Oh, that was not so bad, actually. So we're going to do it. The other way to do it, which I'm not going to do right now because it's already in here and I'm going with it, is to have taken that parchment paper with the dough, put it on top, and then invert it over, and then it kind of falls into it. But in any event, it rips, as you can tell by looking at this here. It does rip. And now, though, the beauty of it is all you have to do is fix it. The dough is soft enough and very forgiving. So don't stress out, okay? Take it and you kind of use your hands to break it off, or to at the top of the sides. Now you see we're doing really well over here. Over here I'm not nearly far enough, so what you do is you take some dough and you patchwork it. And you just give it and you just form it onto the sides where it needs it. Being careful not to make the corners too thick as you double layer it with a little extra dough. But you can see I'm just kind of going all around the edges here. remember, nobody's going to see the inside of this dough. So you don't have to worry too much about what it looks like and if it's pretty or not. I'll show you here in a moment when it's all said and done. You can actually see, if you look, the patches I've made, but that's okay because it's going to be covered with this delicious ricotta cheese filling, and nobody's going to know it at all. You just want this pie crust to hold the filling. The outside of the pie crust is what people will see, and that is actually getting a little bit of a design from the inside of the tin. If you're using just a straight cake pan, you won't get that design, but that's perfectly okay too. This is not a pie that I typically will flute the edges. For those of you who are pie bakers, you can if you use a regular pie pan, but I don't for this one. Like I said, I just like the deep dish. We're going to put a little bit of the decorative lattice work on top, but as you can see, and I'm going to flip it this way a little bit, you can definitely see the patches I've made. But it's all the way up the sides. It looks like it's nice and covered well. Maybe here just a touch more. And I think we're good to go. Now I'll take this extra little dough right here, put that over here for our patchwork, which will definitely break on us. Or I'm sorry, for our lattice work, which will definitely break on us, and we'll have to use some more dough. But for now, this is what you want to get to. You want to get to either the pie crust or the pie pan or the cake pan. You could even use a square pan. You can use whatever you want once you learn the volume of the mixture and what it's going to fill. If you chose to, which I love to do often, you could do little individual ones. You have the little pie pans. You can make little individual ones of these as well. If you're having a dinner party and you want to give everybody their own, that's a great way to do it without having to cut up a pie. So now we have the crust. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to clear off this area. I'm going to show you how we make the filling. So give us a second and we'll be right back. Okay, so the next part of this, of course, is the filling, which is my favorite part. And to do that, it's actually done in two parts. The first part is the egg whites and the sugar. Now, the reason why we use egg whites, the reason why we use egg whites is because, as you will notice, there's no leavening agent that we use in the filling. So, like a baking soda or a baking powder, if you bake or if you've baked at all, you know that those are pretty important elements if you want your cookies to rise or your cakes to rise, etc. In this particular case, while you don't necessarily want a pie to rise, in this particular case, you do want a little bit of rising to it because it creates these beautiful air pockets that lighten up that cheesecake, so when it cools down, it's not crazy, crazy dense, but it's just perfect in terms of the texture of it. So to obtain that type of airiness, if you will, you need to beat the egg whites. And you've probably all done that before, where you beat the egg whites, and there's different stages of egg whites. There is, of course, it's stages. It comes right out of the egg, which looks just like this. And if you remember back to the beginning part of this recipe, the crust calls for 2 egg yolks. The egg white part of that you've separated out will be used for what we're going to do next in the filling. However, you need 4 egg whites for the filling, so you got to add a couple extra. So right now what I've got here is 4 egg whites, and what I'm going to do is put them here in this bowl. And I'm going to turn my mixer on. Now you could do this by hand, but you have to be pretty, patient to get them up to the soft peaks. Instead, I'm going to completely cheat and use the mixer. And I'm going to turn this on pretty high, medium high, to start to get these foamy. Now I'm not looking for stiff peaks here. In fact, I'm looking for about soft peaks to foaminess. So that doesn't take a lot of time. But I'm going to turn it on, we're going to let it get foamy, and then as it does, I'm going to incorporate a cup of sugar, and then we're going to let that run for a bit. So let me start by turning splash around. Kind of depends on how big the bowl is that you're using. And it doesn't take too long for them to begin to get foamy. They actually are starting that process now. Now there is a fine line between getting to the peaks and then the eggs breaking, as it's called, where it turns back into a liquid form. So you definitely want to keep your eye on something like this. This is not something you turn on and then go answer the phone. This is something you got to stick with for a moment. So it's starting to get foamy, and what I'm going to do now is add in the sugar. So we're taking that a little bit at a time. I'm just dropping it right in. Letting that mix. I'm going to turn it up just a bit higher. And there we go. All the sugar is in. Now what we're going to let that do, we're going to let that mix up for a few moments. Probably take another minute, maybe two at tops, to get that sugar all nice and incorporated in and reach to a point where we're ready to combine it in with the rest of the ingredients. So we'll let this run. We'll be back in just a second, and I'll show you the other part of the filling, and then we'll incorporate them together. The next part of the filling, and the second part of the filling, is the ricotta cheese and the flavorings that go in with it. In this case, we're using about 1.5 pounds of ricotta. We're going to put it right into this pan here. I know this container looks a lot bigger than 1.5 pounds. It is. It's 3. But I'm using about half of that. We'll put that over there. We are going to add to that about 1/4 cup of flour and a little bit of salt, which we have in here. Then we're going to add our flavorings. In our case, we're using about 1 tablespoon of lemon zest and 1 tablespoon of orange zest. If you are particular to a type of flavoring, this is where you go for it. This is where you change it up to speak to whatever you want. However, if you're my grandmother's recipe and you want to do the authentic one that she does, we use 1 tablespoon of lemon and 1 tablespoon of orange. And then we use 1 tablespoon of vanilla, which again, if you bake, you know that's quite a bit of vanilla. But it really does end up with a delicious flavor. We're going to just take these things in the bowl right here, and we're going to mix those around till they're well incorporated. This is not something you need a regular mixer for. In fact, this entire recipe you could do without your mixer, including the egg whites, which I'll show you how they ended up here in a moment. The egg white, I have to admit, is a lot easier with the mixer, but not necessary. And this does not take too much time. Again, you're just incorporating it everything. You can see the little bits of zest. You just want to get those all equally distributed as best you can. And move that vanilla all around. Essentially what you're looking for here is a uniform color and consistency throughout. And I think we're pretty much there. It's no more difficult than that. All right. To this now, we're going to add the egg whites. And if you remember what we said on the egg whites is we don't want them very stiff, which these are not. Okay, you can see there is a body to them. They are even a little less than soft peaks. If they had peaks, they'd be able to, when I lifted it out of the pan like this, they would stand right up. As you can tell, it's not. It's kind of dripping off that, which means it's a much softer one. If we were to take our finger and lift it like that, you can see how that peak turns and it falls over. That would be a soft peak. This is a very soft peak, which is fine for what we want. So the more that stands up, the more firm the egg white is. So we have our egg white and our sugar mixture. We're going to just put that right into the same bowl, making sure we get all of that out. And we're almost there. Let's get all that goodness out of the bowl. Best thing ever invented was the rubber spatula, in my view. And then we're going to take that, and instead of the spoon here, I'm going to use a spatula to really kind of fold it in. You're not trying to deflate. If you mix it too quickly, that the airiness you incorporated into your egg mixture is going to deflate. So as best you can, as you'll notice, what I'm doing is I take it and I come out from underneath it and over and flip it around. That's called folding. You just take it and you bring it, so you are incorporating all of the egg whites into the cheese, but you're doing it in a much gentler way. And that helps keep the integrity of the egg whites as you want them, so that when it cooks, it does allow it to rise better. Okay? And that's really it to the filling. And all we're going to do here now, once I feel like that's done, which it will be in just a second here, scrape off that edge, make sure we get it all. I know you can't smell this, but it smells delicious. That bit of orange and lemon is something that the aroma from zest really shines immediately. Okay, so we have our mix. Back to our beautiful pie crust with all its patchwork in it. And we're going to take this filling and just pour it right on in. Make sure we we scrape the sides of that bowl nicely. You'll notice it goes right up to the top. And then we can kind of move that around, just kind of level it off as best we can. And now what's going to happen is we're going to move this all aside. And in just a moment, I'm going to come back. We're going to bring that little bit of lattice work dough that we had set aside. I'm going to bring that back in the rolling pin, etc. And I'm going to show you how we finish this off, put the lattice work on top before we get ready to bake it. So we'll see you in just a sec. Let's make sure we're even here. Okay, the last part now before we actually bake this is to do the lattice work. Now this is optional. You don't have to do this part of it. You don't have to do it the way that I'm going to show you. You can just do it, and I'll explain that in a moment. But I do think it looks nice. It's what Grandma always did, so if it ain't broke, right, don't fix it. Here's a little piece of dough that we set aside. Again, I'm going to put a little flour on my parchment paper. I'm reusing the same parchment paper. Certainly don't go get any more and waste any more. There's no reason at all for that. I'm flattening it out to give it a little head start with my hands. I'm going to throw a little more flour on top, just like we did before. And I'm going to cover it with this paper. Again, don't have to do that. I find it easier. Right now, I'm just going to take it and slowly roll it out from side to side. And then this way. Now, this is definitely going to break on you when you go to lift it up. And that's okay. It's all okay. Trust me, even if it breaks, it's going to taste just as delicious. All right, I've got it about as thick as I want it, or as wide as I want it. I've kind of used the same round diagram that I had made for the pie crust itself, because if you think about it, I want that much to cover the top, although you don't need to be quite as full because you will have spaces in between the lattice. What we're going to do there, and actually the first thing we're going to do is kind of lift it up a little bit, make sure it's a little loose. So just kind of roll it side to side like that. I'm going to use a pastry cutter. You've probably seen these before. You may or may not have them. I like it. It gives it a little bit more of a decorative edge. You can simply use a knife if you'd like to. As I said, instead of doing lattice work, you could get a shape of some sort, a little cookie cutter, and cut out little pieces of this dough and just lay them around the top into various areas if you'd like. That's perfectly acceptable. But we're going to go with the traditional lattice work. So what we do is we take our little lattice cutter and we just start at one end, and we're going about, I don't know, I guess that's about 3/4 of an inch thick. And I'm just making these strips all the way through the dough. And you definitely want different lengths because, as you know, the pie itself, the round pie, has the different lengths, so you'll use all of them. And once you have that cut, I'm going to move it off here to the left and actually bring the pie over. And I'm going to loosen it up a little bit with my knife. And I like to start with the longer ones. So I'm going to take one piece, and I'm going to place the end at the end of the pie crust, but I'm not going to lie it down all the way. I'm gonna fold it back like that and let it wait. I'm going to do the same thing with the next one. Actually, I'm lying here. I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm going to leave this one a little bit further down, but again, not all the way, because once it touches that filling, it tends to break when you try to bring it back. So I'm only going to leave that about 3/4 of the way, and you'll see why in a moment. This next one, I'm going to do like the first and not go very far at all. And then what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go the opposite direction. So to make the lattice work, what you'll do is every other row you will peel back and then place across it one piece. And then you'll take your other lattice, you'll take them and you'll roll them back over. Only again, I'm going to roll them enough. Well, actually, in this case, I got to roll them all the way down because I want to get it there. And then what you'll do is, since I rolled these two back first, I'm going to roll the other one back now. And then I will take another piece. Actually, I need a little bit of a longer piece. And I'm going to put it over those. And I'm going to put this back. And now I take the other two back. And you can tell, here I just got a little cut or a little break on it, which is fine. Now I'm going to take another piece and put it over there. That creates the weave that you're looking for. Now, as you can imagine, if you did this with more strips, say you wanted a nicer, more busy, if you will, lattice work, you just use more pieces. And every other one you keep rolling back and then going this way, and then you alternate what you're rolling back. So now I have that one over. I'm going to roll this back for the last little piece across. Put that back down, and I'm done except for the fact that I want to trim off the edges. And to do that, I literally just kind of press down with my thumb, finish them off. You know, the little piece of crust that is sticking up over from the edge of the pie, if you kind of form those together or seal those with the little lattice work, you can do that. And there you go. That is complete right here. Now you can tell from the way that this pan is moving, if you use these foil pans, they are a little bit flimsy. What I like to do in that case is get another hard pan for support and put it in there, so when you're taking it to and from the oven, you're in much better shape here. But that's how you can see how easy it was to do that lattice work. Like I said, you don't have to. If you wanted to do a shape, you could do a shape. If you know somebody who loves this pie and you want to make it special for them, you could actually take this dough. You could actually take it and roll it out into little ropes and even use it to make little letters. You can do anything you want. You're only bound by your imagination, as I like to say, and somebody else I'm sure said it before me. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this pie, we're going to put it in the oven, 350 degrees. It does take a little bit of time. It takes close to an hour to cook. So I'm going to go put this in the 350 degree oven, and then in just a moment I'm going to show you, or once that's done, I'm going to show you what that looks like when it's all complete. And there's only one thing left to do, of course, now, and that's to eat it. As you can see here, this is a pie that has been complete and cooled. Once it comes out of the oven, what happens is, if you've ever made a quiche, you'll be familiar with this. It'll be nice and rounded. It actually, and that's from the egg whites being raising it. Once you put it into the refrigerator, which you definitely want to do for several hours to overnight before you eat it, that's when it kind of sinks down and becomes what you're looking at here. You can tell the lattice work on top here. The lattice work we did just a moment ago was a little bit better than this. This broke a lot more on me, but trust me when I tell you it's going to be just as delicious. So, to serve this, obviously you need to cut it. What I like to do is to literally, it's a very dense pie. So what you can do is literally take it and hold your hand here, flip it over and remove the pan. And then help it back over and put it right in the center of your cutting board or your pie plate. This now you can put on your table. You can do it however you'd like to. At this point, you're going to take it and simply cut it, however big of a piece you'd like. If that's big enough for you, have a field day. If you want to go a little smaller, which I will, I'm going to turn that around. We're going to try it into probably 12ths. Remember, it's like a cheesecake, or it is a cheesecake, so it is pretty heavy. And you're going to take that, put it on your plate. If you want to, you could garnish it with a little bit of flavoring, like whether it be a sauce of some sort, maybe I don't know, a raspberry sauce or anything like that, but you don't need to. The flavor in this is perfect the way it is, if you ask me. You can tell it's nice, and you can see the density of it, and it's just a beautiful density and texture, as you'll taste. It stands up very nicely. You don't see the fact that I had to patchwork the pie crust. None of that matters. It's all right here, and this is your final result, what you're looking for. And now, of course, you taste it. And as I mentioned, this is always one of my favorite things my grandmother used to make, is the ricotta pie. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that brings back so many memories. You can definitely taste the lemon and the orange in it. And that hint of orange really makes a huge difference. If you would like to flavor it with something else, you're welcome to. But there you go. So here's your Graham's ricotta pie. Not very difficult at all. It will absolutely be the hit. You'll probably never make another type of cheesecake again. So put the love into it. Get that lattice work on there. Make the filling, as I said, and keep an eye on those peaks in your egg whites, and you'll come out with the best cheesecake you've ever had in your life. Thanks again for joining us for Cooking with Love. We'll see you again soon. Oh, so